Hey world, it's me here to talk about writing. It looks like my internet's a little glitchy, so I'll post everything in the comments just in case it doesn't come through. I hope you're all doing well on this Sunday, whether you're tuning in live or watching this later. So I guess even if it's not a Sunday, I hope you're doing well. Where is it going? Sorry, I'm so distractible. Storytelling. Today, I want to talk to you about different ways you can tell your story. The inspiration for this writing activity comes from my mother. She lives in Florida half of the year and just came back to New York. Luckily, I was able to visit her. As I've shared, I don't know if everybody knows, but my son's immunocompromised as a transplant recipient, so we're being extra cautious with our physical distancing and staying out of the community and social situations. So my mom came back from Florida and she's been quarantining because she cares for her elderly brother who has some health risks. So I was able to hug her and I was like, wow, it's been months since I could, hang out with and hug another person without feeling weird about it or scared that I was going to pick up something that I would pass on to my medically fragile child. So that was really cool. And then the second cool thing was my mother is a wonderful storyteller. Like, I forgot how enjoyable it is to be around her when she's constantly talking about history and family stories and telling something that's super common, but putting a twist on it so that it's interesting. And I thought that might be a really fun thing to do for our activity. So today, we're going to work on storytelling and the ability to frame your narrative in a way that excites readers or your audience if you want to share it to them. And your audience can even be you, even if this is a journal activity and you're going to go back and read it later. So it starts, as always, with ideas. So what you need to be successful today, something to write with. I know some of you type, and that is totally optional. I know my creativity works better when I have a writing utensil, but that's just me. And take a moment to just think of an event, an occurrence, an interaction, a memory, something in your life that just kind of comes to mind. And I'll just wait. So the first step is to think of some moments. What I'd like you to do is spend some time, I'll give you a specific amount of time, making a list of moments that stand out in your memory. So let's just say 1 minute to blurt them all out, just shorthand. Park yesterday, 12th birthday, etc., etc. They can be positive, negative, they can be current events, things that are going on in the world around you, they could be from your past. Try to stay away from things in the future, but if that's where your creative brain goes, then put them there. So 3, 2, 1, go. Write down as many events as you can in a minute. All right, 20 more seconds. Go ahead, finish up those events, and stop. All right. Take a big deep breath. Get ready. We're going to go for another minute. I want you to choose your top three. And if you only have three, it's pretty easy. For your top three events or memories or moments that came out in your brainstorm, I want you to list as many adjectives as you can to describe them. So, like exciting, terrifying, scary, nerve wracking, exuberant, complicated, etc., etc. So, 1 minute describing using just adjectives. And go. All right, about 5 more seconds and pause. So go ahead and minimize the browser if you're typing or set your paper aside. This is something I do with all of the writing activities. You really need to put some space. I recommend hours, days, even weeks, depending on the type of activity, but pausing before you move on to the next piece of the activity allows you to mentally step away from it so that you can see it with more fresh eyes when you come back. I'll just talk a little bit about what we're going to do. We're going to break the process of writing your story into a very formulaic kind of process, for lack of a better word, but it should result in a more rich narrative. So what does that look like and what am I trying to say? You should have brainstormed some events and moments that stand out. And then you should have also brainstormed some adjectives. So hopefully one of your events, you'll see some adjectives that kind of fall on a spectrum like this, like one's positive and one's negative. But that doesn't necessarily mean bad. So let me give you an example. I started today's live feed sharing that my mom came back from Florida to New York and how exciting it was to interact with another human. My son has some severe medical needs, so we've been very, very strict about our social lives. I was really nervous about being around people without a mask, but my mom's in quarantine, so I know that it's safe. But I was also really excited. So I have two conflicting emotions, right? Like excitement and anxiousness or some type of nervous feeling. That doesn't mean nervousness is bad. It's just if we had to label them positive and negative, it would be on the negative end of the spectrum. You know what I mean? So hopefully you have an event like that where there's a little bit of positive and a little bit of negative related to it. The next thing I'm going to have you do is plot it out. So let me just write. This is not a great as a timeline. So I have seeing my mom excited and nervous. So I'm going to write the sequence of events or like this series of moments that created this large event of seeing my mom. So I might say like talked to her Friday, knew she was leaving Florida. Around 11 o'clock Friday night, checked in to make sure she was still safe, told me about the book she's reading, and so on and so forth, until I get to today. So you're kind of just making a timeline about the facts. You're leaving your emotions out of it for a small moment, but then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about our emotional roller coaster during that timeline, and that's going to help us as writers figure out where to start our actual story. So instead of journaling like we usually do at the beginning, we're just going to continue with this process-oriented approach and plot it out. So let me be clear. You have one thing, an event, moment, or memory, that had some conflicting emotions involved with it. Your next step is going to be to plot a timeline. Mine's a pretty short window, it's a couple days, but maybe your event is graduating high school and your timeline is going to be your school career. Or maybe it's 4 years, your high school career, or maybe it's a college thing. I don't really know. Maybe it's parenting, right? I have a 14-year-old. I could start from when he was born all the way until now, right? So it's your call how big of a time span you want to cover. But regardless of whether it's a day or years, we're all going to spend, let's say, 5 minutes getting as detailed as possible as we can with our sequence of events. Side note, you do not need to know specific dates, as in numbers and times. Okay? If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Otherwise, you can go ahead and start. I'll type up the directions and then I'll do the activity with you. Okay, so again, making that timeline. All right, we are about halfway done. So if you feel like your timeline is finished, I recommend you go back to it and maybe flesh out some of the details. So if at one of the points on your timeline you just put a word, maybe you add some sentences or narrative to go with it so you can get real clear about how everything kind of went down. Maybe you can go back and add some more details, maybe what you were thinking or feeling, what you saw. All right, just another 60 seconds. All right. Go ahead and finish up. Again, set it aside. We'll do a little talking and then we'll get back to the activity. I feel like this one, I might need to answer questions. I haven't really figured out how to explain it fully. But I will show you mine. So what we have are events. And remember I said choose two emotions. So at the top I have excited and at the bottom I have nervous. So I went through all of the moments, the trajectory of my mom leaving from Florida and how I felt the entire time. So see if there's a way. Sorry, still haven't figured out cameras yet. So she leaves for Florida. I'm pretty excited, right? So I put a dot there. Then I called her because I was nervous about her drive, and I put a dot there. Then she makes it to New York late at night, so I'm more excited than I am nervous. Like I'm relieved that she's home. Before I go on, pro tip. You're probably not really excited about those details, but they are part of the story. Notice, in my internal world, I wasn't really excited either. I'm pretty neutral. And that's important, right? Because this charts, I guess I'd call it, is going to help us figure out where we can actually start our story that makes it really exciting for our audience. So she makes it to New York. I feel like I want to see her, but I'm kind of scared of coronavirus. I know she's been quarantining, but my son's medically fragile, and she did drive here, so she did have to go to gas stations. So I'm more towards the nervous side. Then she invites us over, and I say maybe. My emotions drop even farther into the negative realm. Again, not bad, but anxiousness would be a great word because that conflict between wanting to see her versus wanting to protect the integrity of my son's health and like there aren't clear signs for what's right or wrong. It feels like a large decision. So that conflict created that negative emotion. But then I send her a text and say, you know what, we are going to come over. So I'm kind of excited. I'm not terribly excited because I still have that nervousness weighing me down, but I haven't seen my mom since December. So next thing happens is we walk in the house and she bursts into tears because she didn't read her text and didn't know we were coming. So she really saw my dog run into her house and was like, whose dog is this? And before she could connect the dots, I walked in and she was just so happy to see us. But even better than that, I got to give her a hug and I didn't realize like how much it had been impacting me not hugging other people. So it felt so good to hug her. And then we had a fire, which was great. I was calm. I was no longer scared of health. And kind of like pushed it out of my mind. And then at the fire, she told stories, which is one of my favorite things. So it's up here. And then I didn't want to leave. It's not a negative feeling, but it's also not great. So that's what I want you to do. Here's why. You grab your reader's attention with the intensity of your story. Just because the story actually starts here sequentially, you can already see that's not a good place for me as a writer to start because there isn't a lot of intensity here. Likewise, I don't want to start my story here. Where do I want to start it? Where there is the biggest spike. So I can put it at the part where I'm the most nervous if I want to create tension, or I can put it at the point where I'm the most excited if my goal is to wrap readers in with like something heartwarming or exciting. Okay? You don't need to think about that yet, like which and where, but what you do need to do is plot out your emotions. Side note, where was it? Oh, when I went to go see her and send her a text, when I decided to go see her and send a text message, but she didn't read it, although that's not purely excitement, it's easier if you just think of it as polarizing emotions, but still understanding this is really any positive emotion and this is anyone that's towards the negative side, not that it necessarily is negative. So I hope that makes sense. Why don't you take, I think a minute and a half will be enough, and go ahead and plot out your emotional roller coaster for the event. And again, if you have questions, please write them in the chat. About 20 more seconds. All right, go ahead and pause. Just give you a moment. All right, so here's the fun part. Like I said, you want to start your story where there's the most excitement, which for me is here or here. Regardless, what happened beforehand is still part of the story. As a writer, I'm going to wrap that in. So you start in the action. There's actually a term for it. It's called en media res, and literally translates to in the action in Latin. You start there, and you recognize this so much in TV shows and movies. I guess in a TV show, it would be like that mini clip that catches you up from the episode before. That's like the action, the height of the action, and then they ease into this new episode. Um, in books or movies, it's like when it starts with a fight scene or it starts with conflict, and then your brain is like, oh, what's going on? And then you get the information. So it hooks you, it baits you into the story. Same for your writing. But I had a choice. Do I start with the negative emotion or the positive? My brain was like, definitely the positive, like warm, fuzzy feels. However, there is this moment right here where I send my mom a text and she doesn't read it. That's an opportunity for irony. If I start with seeing her first, it doesn't play out as well when I know something and she doesn't, if we already know the outcome, right? So that's what pushed me as a writer to here. I didn't get to write the entire thing, but I'll just share with you. So if I know I'm going to start with my mom inviting me over, it's not going to be real interesting for my readers if I'm like, first sentence, my mom invited me over to visit her. But dialogue can really capture people. So I think I'm going to start it like this. Hey mom, how did it feel waking up in New York? So good. Exhausting, but good. Her voice echoed through the phone. Before I could ask another question, she invited me over. Immediately, my heart sank. But coronavirus. I didn't get to write more, but as a reader, or as a writer, I would fill my readers in on why that's scary to me. I would put my son's medical details. Then I would talk about how I decided to go there anyways rather than wait. And I text her, but I never get a reply. So my readers won't know if she had an answer or not. But that moment when I walk in the door and she cries, then we'll all figure out that she didn't even know that I was coming to visit her. And throughout that, I can pepper in all of these details that came before. So I'm going to pause there, talk a little bit more. Whether your audience is future readers or your future self, writing is a pathway to healing. When I write about events, it lets me see them from a different angle. It lets me be in charge of the narrative, give myself power in places I may or may not have had it. A lot of times, despite how much I work on my emotional sobriety, right, through multiple different pathways that I choose, writing has always been my go-to. When I write an event in my life in my journal, I realize how I really felt about it. Because there's something about that distance. So the most basic level, it can be cathartic, and then from there, it can grow to whatever you want. So you don't have to use this chart. It's just another tool, Tools in our toolbox is important in all areas of our life. And for me, I've found it to be a good way to figure out where to start stories. Even if the stories are something I never share with humanity or the public, it's just getting something off my chest. I like to put some, I don't know, flair into it. I guess I'm with a flair. I don't know. This is the part where I'm just rambling. And I'm like, you know what, Lisa? I should probably get off the internet. But I do know life is intense for a lot of people these days. And I just encourage you to find what works for you to process your feelings, regardless of who we are, where we live, what our beliefs are. We are emotional beings, and there's certainly emotions going through all of us right now. For me, writing works. You can try it out, and if it doesn't work for you, what does? If recovery can help you with that process in any way, by offering peer support, or maybe you could attend one of our other online options like a workout class or a meditation or yoga, um, we're here for you. We're all family, we're in it together, and I look forward to seeing you again, maybe Monday for positive and productive. And as always, if you leave comments, I will do my best to address them and get back to you. Have a wonderful day. See you soon.